This is the quote from Governor DeSantis about climate change. Quote, "I am not in the pews of the church of the global warming leftists." This is what he thinks about climate change.
Much of the media and many politicians tell us that events like Hurricane Ian are symptomatic of a climate crisis caused by global warming as a result of carbon emissions.
Perhaps he is smart enough to recognize that this is not normal.
They believe that catastrophic events like Hurricane Ian can be avoided by moving away from fossil fuels to green energy sources like solar and wind, even as the worst polluters, such as China and India, increase their reliance on coal and gas. But some scientists, who also acknowledge the threat of global warming, but rarely get airtime, believe the approach should be one of smart solutions through economic prioritization, not unrealistic goals like net zero emissions.
Spending lots of money on buying inefficient technologies that you know are inefficient, like current solars, current wind, current batteries, current electric cars, is not the solution. That's just a way to spend lots and lots of money. Yes, if you spend $100 billion, a little bit of that will go into innovation in the individual companies. But if innovation is the solution, you should have spent all $100 billion on innovation.
Well, over the weekend, Mr. Lomborg took to Twitter to point out that globally, far from increasing, 2021 actually saw the fewest number of hurricanes ever in the satellite era. That's to say, between 1980 and 2021. And in his book False Alarm, Mr. Lomborg writes that the fact that the cost of US hurricanes has gone up dramatically is being used to suggest that global warming is making hurricanes worse and more destructive. But what's actually happening is that as cities expand, so does the target area susceptible to storm damage. It's what he calls the bullseye effect. This was nicely illustrated in this animation from hazards and disasters geographer Stephen Strader that shows housing growth from 1940 to 2020 in the Tampa region.
Is that the prime issue you've seen with impact? Is it the buildings aren't up to snuff, or is it that there's just incredibly different weather patterns?
You can see the newer houses are intact and they're fine, but the older homes, which were built lower and not up to the current codes, they suffered more damage. So having solid, good building codes is a key to this issue.
Well, perhaps one of the best examples of mitigating risk is Louisiana. Back in 2005, Hurricane Katrina killed 1,800 people in several states, including the Pelican State. 15 years later, Hurricane Ida, a storm of nearly equal strength, hit Louisiana. Yes, again, there was damage, but it could have been a lot worse. And crucially, less than 10 people were killed. What saved the state was the Congress-funded $14.5 billion hurricane and storm damage risk reduction system.
Not protection, but risk reduction. So that's our focus, is reducing risk. And what you see on this map here today is in the heavy blue line is essentially an earthen levee with flood wall system that forms a perimeter about 130 miles around the entire New Orleans metropolitan area. Now, there are pump stations within the system, there's flood walls, and there's earthen levees.
Louisiana's risk reduction system demonstrated that the U.S. can, to some extent, mitigate weather-related phenomena.
We just did something about climate change for the first time in decades. That's why we've got to win this as that hurricane bears down on Florida. We got to win in the midterms.
Today, rather than pumping billions into headline-grabbing initiatives in an effort to take us closer to an unachievable carbon zero, politicians need to put more emphasis on the areas that will have an effect on reducing global temperatures.
You should spend less. You should spend it smarter and more directed, and you could help solve much more of global warming in the long run, because you would be driving the actual solutions that'll become so cheap that China, India, and Africa will want to use them. And at the same time, you'd also be inspiring these nations to say, we want to do the same thing because this is cheap and a very effective way in the long run to solve global warming.